Hi, and welcome to the next installment of the Countess Shogun rigging series. In this one, we will be rigging the character's neck and head. As always, let's start by preparing the scene. Let's select all of the neck and head bones and move them to an empty bone layer. Make sure to select both the deformation bones as well as the temp bones. If you find it hard to select overlapping bones like this, try switching to pose mode and doing it there. Changing bone layers works the same both in edit and pose modes. Now back in edit mode, I will scale the head and head temp bones so that they are easier to select and work with. Next, let's create the neck control bone. We'll start by duplicating the neck 01 temp bone. Next, change its scale so it's easier to know which one is which. And then rename it to neck control. Next, let's rename the neck 01 temp bone to MCH neck 01 driver and the second one to MCH neck 02 driver. Then let's switch back to pose mode to constrain them to the control. Select the neck control and then shift select one of the neck drivers. And then by using shift control C, add a copy rotation constraint. Switch the spaces to local and then set the influence to 0.5 because we will be splitting the control's rotation between the two neck driver bones. Now select the other neck driver and then shift select the one that has the constraint and then using the copy attributes option, copy the constraints to the other bone. The neck control is now working correctly, so let's connect the deformation bones to the drivers. Duplicate neck 01 and 02 to create the buffers, scale them down a bit, and then rename them to buff neck 01 and buff neck 02. Then parent the buffers to their respective drivers. And finally, we can constrain the neck bones to their buffers, as usual using the copy transforms constraint. And that wraps up the neck setup so we can give it a custom shape and test its behavior. It is looking good, so let's move on to the head. Let's start by renaming the head temp bone to head control. I don't like that it's facing a different direction compared to the neck bones, so let's scale it in the negative so that it's pointing in the same direction as the neck. And if we enable the display axis option, we can see that it's not oriented the same way as the neck. So using Shift N, let's copy the orientation from one of the neck drivers. This will now give us a consistent behavior when we animate the neck and the head. I will also go ahead and give the head control a custom shape. I prepared these beforehand so that you don't have to watch me model a circle. Next, let's connect the head deform bone to this control. As always, we duplicate it to create a buffer bone, then we scale that down so it's easier to differentiate between the two, and we give it the buff prefix. Then let's parent the buffer to the head control, and then use a copy transforms constraint to constrain the head to its buffer. Now this is something that you could already animate, but I want to also show you how to create a simple space switch for the head. For that, we will need some extra bones, so let's start by snapping the 3D cursor to the head control bone, and then using Shift A add a new bone and drag it up a bit so it's a bit longer. Then rename it to MCH head follow chest, and then parent this new bone to MCH neck 02 driver. Then select the MCH head follow neck bone again. Enable the bone layer that contains the chest control bone, shift select the chest control, and then press Ctrl Alt A to copy the chest control's rotation to MCH head follow chest. And then in pose mode, add a copy rotation constraint to the head follow chest bone with the chest control as the target. Switch back to edit mode and then parent the head control to head follow chest bone. So now the head control will follow the rotation of the chest, but it will ignore the rotation of the neck. This just makes it easier to animate the neck without having to counter rotate the head all the time. Now let's repeat the same process and add another space switch for the head. This time we will copy the rotation of the torso. So add a new bone again, parent this new bone to the head follow chest bone, and then parent the head to this new bone. Then select this new bone again, And using Ctrl-Alt-A, we will copy the rotation from the torso control to this new bone. And then back in pose mode, let's constrain this new bone to the torso control using a copy rotation constraint. With that, we can now have the head ignore the rotation from the chest as well. But it will rotate with the torso. Next, let's add a couple of custom properties to the head so that we can easily enable or disable this behavior. So select the head and add two new properties. Rename the first one to follow chest and set the property value and the default values to 0.0. Then edit the second property and rename it to follow torso. You can leave the values as they are, so this is enabled by default. Then let's copy the follow chest property as the new driver. Then select the head follow chest bone, navigate to the copy rotation constraint and paste this driver on the influence property. Then let's do the same for follow torso. First copy the value as a new driver, then select the head follow torso bone. Here I noticed that I never renamed it, so let's call it MCH head follow torso. Then find its copy rotation constraint and paste driver on the influence property. We can then go ahead and test to see if everything is working as expected. And lastly, if you learned something from these videos and would like to see me make more, consider subscribing and maybe supporting me on one of the platforms listed below. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.